Okay, the next speaker is Kevin Bradley from the RSPCA, who's going to talk to us about the mobile clinic, which has been going for a number of years now, and the pros and cons of mobile clinics in Australia. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Joy. Yes, my paper today will just be to give an operational overview of our PAWS unit. Thank you. To start with, PAWS is we call it the Portable Animal Welfare Service. It's a completely independent mobile veterinary surgery. Many of you may have seen them in overseas examples, but it's a first here in Australia. It's quite a large unit. It does require a prime mover to transport, and when we talk about some of the operational challenges, I'll go into that in more detail. The unit was specifically designed for desexing programs focused on cats, and it is vet surgeons board approved, and that's important for a lot of the work that we do with RSPCA, obviously working on our own animals as opposed to going and doing community programs. That was essential. And when I talk about some of the operational challenges and some of the feedback we get from the community, was quite a deal of scrutiny on the unit. So I'll cover that later in the paper. That's the unit itself. We have the luxury within RSPCA Queensland that we do have a Mack Prime Mover that was donated to us by Mack Trucks. It predominantly carries our mobile education unit around, and it gave us the luxury that when it's available, it can tow PAWS. It was officially launched in 2004. It certainly didn't get traction early, probably because it was a bit of an unknown quantity, and it's taken us a lot of time to get momentum with PAWS, which thankfully I can say that I believe we are now getting. But we're a long way down. There were quite a few years when we look at the number of trips that we've conducted. The vast majority, 95% of our trips, have been over the last couple of years. It was of a high capital cost, circa $350,000, and again, that's almost 10 years ago, with significant fit-out costs. I'll talk about maintenance costs further on because it was a one-off design and it was purpose-built. That's a fraction of what the actual spend has probably been over that period. We've had to do a lot of significant retrofitting and repairs and maintenance to the unit purely because of the work that it does and the train it's on and the amount of miles that it covers. It was purchased with generous financial support of our Noosa friends of the RSPCA, a very passionate group that wanted to see something done in this space. And the first desexing campaign was held on the Sunshine Coast in 2004. Why PAWS of all of the options that were available, and many of them you'll hear about today, and I'm sure you have over the last day or so and will over the next week. During 2003-2004, we were presented with nearly 17,000 abandoned unwanted cats or kittens. I'm sure that's not unusual to anyone here. RSPCA wanted to think outside the box and look at addressing it by targeting specific shires and running desexing months and supporting it with running PAWS concurrently with that program. Our Chief Executive Officer at the time was also exposed to mobile desexing units in the United States and in the UK, and it felt that it was a reasonable model for profiling the issue, drawing attention to the issue and then offering support. Our aim with PAWS was to assist overpopulation, knowing that it wasn't something that RSPCA could address, nor the Animal Welfare League or all of the like-minded groups. It needed to be a multi-pronged approach, and certainly profiling the issue, and that's still today one of the current things, is getting everybody else and the major stakeholders involved to actually understand the message. The Noosa branch, as I say, were very committed. They were wanting a veterinary surgery to be constructed at the time to offer low-cost community desexing. That wasn't felt to be the priority, particularly considering that the issue runs right across the country. So the decision was made to invest in a mobile desexing unit. The current operational model, and that's important, it has modified slightly over time. As I say, just as people have become more comfortable with PAWS and understand the issues, issues such as that it's not a low-cost desexing solution, it is subsidised. It's far from a low-cost exercise, it's quite an expensive exercise. Areas within Queensland with a demonstrated need for assistance are targeted, so we speak to the local councils and welfare groups, and then we negotiate with council to organise a PAWS trip, and then we work on a via request for proposals. So we basically tailor each trip, and I'll speak about that in more detail, to each particular council and set of circumstances. Once a location's been selected, vets are expected to be contacted. We leave this the responsibility of either ourselves or council to negotiate with the local vets. We've had some success in some councils and far from success in others. But they're expected to be approached about offering desexing at reduced rates and offering it during that month. And then members of the public are obviously encouraged to desex their cat over that month and gain the benefit of desexing. We're not pushing them into PAWS. PAWS is there to profile the issue and drive people that are capable of paying to private vets, but we wanted to offer a solution for those that were limited in their capacity. The proposed model was also to ask for about $40 or $50 donation to the RSPCA if it was fully funded through council to assist some of our cost offset. The cost offset at the moment is run at about 35 to 40%. We're looking for from councils to support it, as I say, because of the high operational cost of the unit. I've just put up the criteria for assistance. It's something that has really been highly scrutinised, who we're offering this service to, whether they have the capacity to pay, and we certainly have the potential very easily to fall out of favour with private veterinarians where there's the perception that we're going in and taking work away from those people. Application of the criteria is quite a different thing, and I'll talk about that when I come to the challenges of the current program. But that's our current policy is that basically they need to be of restricted means. That's the unit itself. It's probably very difficult to see, extremely difficult to see. But it's, as I say, it's a semi-trailer, so site selection is absolutely critical to it. Louise Lawrence in her paper will speak about how significant site selection is in how effective our PAWS programs are. But ultimately, we try and do a desktop assessment of a PAWS application from a council, from our head office. It's really important that we get as much information as possible from the councils without having to fly somebody out to actually go and inspect the sites. In many instances, we've chosen to do that purely because it is so difficult until you go and see the site itself. Because this unit is there for a week, whilst it is independent, it has got generator power and its own water supply. Really, across the period of a week, it's essential that it is plugged into water, and if we can get access to mains power, that certainly makes things far more efficient. And I'll talk about that, just the electrical load of autoclaves and running that sort of equipment and operating equipment over the period of the week. It's the refuelling of the generator that becomes an issue. That's the PAWS unit itself set up in a very rudimentary state. We usually have been targeting shopping centres and car parks where there's high load, obviously again to profile the issue. That's where it works most effectively. The small marquee there is set up for admissions, and Louise will talk about that, I'm sure, in detail. That's just to give you a glimpse of the inside of the unit. It's a very cramped space, and I'll talk about it when it comes to one of the challenges. These guys are the submariners of the desexing world. They work in very tight, confined spaces. We've had instances of people actually experiencing vertigo in the unit because it does move, and because of the lack of windows in there for obvious reasons, you also can't see out. So it's quite a closed environment. Operational challenges. The model itself is reliant on strong council and community support, and as I say, for the first few years it was of enormous frustration to RSPCA Queensland purely because a lot of the people we were trying to market it to weren't the people in the positions that they could authorise, find funding or support for this program. People were very, very nervous of it. It requires local veterinarians to support the program, and that was very, very difficult because it was seen as a threat. In some instances, there are some vets that are incredibly supportive of the program. Certainly over a period of time, I think, with more and more reinforcement of the overall issue, there's been greater acceptance of the program. But again, we're going into other people's backyards, and we're very, very mindful of the fact that there is that perception that we're taking business away. The operational model is for us not to be there to do the post-operative work, though. All referrals go back to private vets. We try and get them on board before we go into the program to let them know, to give them the heads up, and as I say, to concurrently be promoting low-cost desexing over the period that PAWS is there. We hope then that's at least providing the opportunity for the vets to convert some new clients. The location of the unit and site specifications are critical to the success of the program. Louise will talk about that, particularly with Moreton Bay, where we've worked very, very closely with one council, multiple trips over a short period of time. So we've learnt a lot, and they also had the flexibility to work with us to modify the program on the run to try and work out where we were getting the best effect. There is significant logistic and administrative load. As late as this year, we have got an administrative assistant within the Vet Services area at RSPCA that's been able to offer some administrative support that's been sadly lacking. Very, very difficult. There's a lot of backwardsing and forwardsing to get a trip organised. You know, the site selection, teeing up, rostering, getting staff organised, accommodation, flights, meals, the whole gambit, because, as I say, we're working remotely. There is a requirement for a highly adaptable and flexible team. We've had situations occur where there isn't the caseload in a particular shire. We'll do everything we can to make it a positive experience for the council. We've worked in desexing dogs. We've done whatever we could to make the trip beneficial, because we're really relying on repeat business. It gains momentum the number of times that you visit a particular council and people feel comfortable with the program and what we're trying to achieve. And ultimately, one challenge is the small number of animals. We desex approximately averaging just over 100 animals in a week. Again, that's a really small part of the overall issue. But as I say, we're only trying to address one area of it and promote the issue more generally. Operational continuity, obviously with staff turnover, recruitment, retention, off-site volunteers. We've got some very, very good volunteers. We've got great levels of support within our own team for the unit, but it is difficult. They travel away from home. They work with all of the, I suppose, inconvenience of being away from home for large periods of time. Our aim was to have the unit out for 20 weeks per year. Currently, we're pushing hard to get 10. There have been some other issues that have impacted that. So, yeah, the reliance on, particularly highly skilled people that have the experience, you need quite a pool of people available. And as Anne Chester will testify, it's a real drag on our existing pool of vets to just juggle PAWS visits at the same time. But it's something that we're addressing. As I say, our team are very committed to it. Price sensitivity, mixed messaging in the community. This is a really important one. That issue of whether this is low cost. I've heard the unit referred to as a mobile meat wagon by members of vets in the community. It's a lot of people are very, very confused about PAWS, no matter how much work we do up front in working with the councils. There are all sorts of perceptions out there until people can see and feel and touch the unit and feel comfortable with it. We've got various models because certainly I was very desperate. My mandate was to get the unit out 20 weeks per year, that we wanted it out almost at all costs, because if it's not out there, no one knows what it does and what it's doing. So we've taken quite a hit from a cost perspective and modified our operational model to actually get exposure to the unit. We've almost done anything we can to develop that relationship and get a foot in the door with some of these councils. Cost structure also is something that we've been very flexible on, but it's something that we're mindful of. If councils are saying that they don't have the money, we do everything we possibly can to still come up with a proposal that's workable without sort of taking a complete bath on it. Price sensitivity is very important. Even a $40 donation is an incredible impost in some situations. We work in many, many very low socio-economic areas, as many of you would. And I won't steal any of Louise's thunder, but it's something that actually has a huge impact. And when you look at the number of animals we do and where we've done them, I can sort of put the costs against it, and I'll show you how dramatically it affects the number of animals admitted. There is a significant variation in caseload. We don't get the opportunity to health check these animals. They're admitted the morning of surgery. The level of post-operative care, depending on the age class of the animals and the health status of the animals, Again, a very, very minute percentage of the animals that are presented to PAWS have ever seen a vet before in their life. Depending on where we are and how accepting the vets are, the level of post-operative care and the assumption that we're there to take control of the animal post-surgery, even with complications that are not related to surgery. PAWS is a one-off design, as I've already explained. It was built by Bramaco Trailers in Victoria with quite a lot of input from my predecessor, Ann Coval, to make the unit functional. It's got all of the issues associated with a custom build, little things like doorknobs that come off just purely from being in a unit that's on the road a lot of the time and rattling, autoclave machines that just because they overheat or they're running on insufficient power supply. Our maintenance team have spent an enormous amount of time just prior to my appointment 2 years ago. There was a lot of work done to bring the unit back up to speed. It had been neglected for a period of time. It has leaks. We've, as late as last week, been addressing issues with ISO leaks and oxygen leaks and all those sorts of things, and doing it remotely. Again, the unit now is 8 years old, so you're going to get failure. Obviously, it's not used all of the time. Like a boat, if it was to be running 24/7, we'd probably have half the maintenance issues we have. So our push is to make the unit work harder, and that will reduce a lot of these issues, as I say, because you're addressing them as they arise and using the equipment more regularly. Remote operation equipment failure, again, that comes with a high cost because in many situations we're working very remotely. We don't have access to people that can service the equipment, etc. Laundry requirements, I've never heard, it's a topic of general conversation with us now, how they deal with the laundry load that's developed. If it's alongside of a veterinary clinic or working out of one of our shelters, we don't have those sorts of issues. We're set up to deal with the laundry. It's just the bane of our existence. These guys work long hours, long days, and then they've got this enormous load of washing to do that they skulk into motels and laundromats and try and deal with. And some of the laundry, as you'd all be aware, it's not the sort of stuff that you want to sort of draw too much attention to yourself. Staff workload and issues of working remotely. As I say, they're committed because they're there. They address issues as they arise. But they are long days. We start admitting animals first thing in the morning. Louise will talk about it in detail, but often they're there until 6 o'clock at night. And the vets, everybody mucks in, and I'll talk about that as being one of the real advantages of this program, is that when on tour, they all sort of join forces, the vets, the nurses, the volunteers, everybody's expected to do whatever it takes to make the trip a success. Security issues are important too, working in low socioeconomic areas, and there's high cost associated with security for very little benefit, with the exception that nobody's going to vandalise an expensive piece of equipment. Promotion and messaging, again, a difficult one, and one that we're revisiting continually. There's been some investment in a one-size-fits-all. We've tried to do some of the work for councils in developing some promotional collateral that councils can use to explain PAWS, to explain the issue, to define our role in it. Some of the stuff that we had available to us was largely campaign-driven. There was the Born to Die campaign and kitten liquidation. So all of this sort of collateral that we've tried to modify for PAWS, obviously, again, going into other people's backyards, expecting council to partner. They're often not quite as comfortable with the imagery and the messaging that we are. As an animal welfare organisation. Born to Die, for example, was considered inappropriate by some councils, so we've had to do a mad scramble to be able to develop some material that was more palatable, but still get our message across. We have recently invested in some rebranding with the assistance of AWL. We've worked towards the weapons of mass production branding and imagery. That's just some examples of the collateral that we'd had. And this is the direction in which we were heading, which is to focus more on the fact that it is a plague, it is a big issue, we are at war, and I firmly believe that that's the truth, to be honest. It's all of us working together, and weapons of mass production really became not about the euthanasia of the animal, it's the size and scope of the issue and the fact that we really do have a lot of work to do. And it's working quite well for us. Successes. Obviously, the opportunity to work with like-minded organisations, we haven't done enough of it, probably because we're all so busy within our own organisations and with other priorities. But certainly it's great to work with people within council that are like-minded, that actually understand these issues and will work with us to come up with models that will work. Working with the AWL, for example, on weapons of mass production, I've spoken with Joy. Because resources are limited, we did find that in some circumstances, for example, Ipswich City Council, we were both playing in the same place at the one time, which wasn't particularly good use of either of our resources. As I say, PAWS has its place, but unless we're aware of who else is doing what else in what region, it does make it very, very difficult, because we do put a lot of time into negotiating and preparing proposals for councils and then following right through. And at the 11th hour to hear that there's been a decision made where they're following another program that's supported by another group, if we spoke and we had open communication, we wouldn't need to invest that level of time and effort. Team culture and development opportunity. As I say, the guys that go away on PAWS, irrespective of their personal attributes or how they would operate in a normal environment, send them away on a PAWS trip. Because you've just got to get on in there. It's so tight, it's so confined, it's such a busy workload. It's great from a team building opportunity. Our volunteers, everybody comes home. I think they really get a sense of achievement. They're dealing with a really big issue, obviously. They're dealing with, being remote, and they're dealing with the fact that they've only got one another to support each other. They haven't got the luxury of the whole organisation behind them. And it works very well. I don't know if you can see those numbers. For example, just speaking about price sensitivity, if you look at the Tweed Shire numbers, I think, Louise, though, it was close to $70 that Tweed Shire had chosen. As I say, we present the proposal to council. Council then decide at what price point they're going to offer this. In many situations, council want it to be a gift to the people, but that causes problems with us, because then they don't want to means test it. They don't want to be seen to be isolating various areas of the community, which seems a bit odd because that's where it needs to be targeted. But yeah, wherever the cost grows, even to above $40 or $50, it has a massive impact. It halves the numbers or less, and then they throw the price of microchipping on. We try and make it a one all-inclusive price for desexing and microchipping, and that's what we push with councils. But councils really need to make an investment to be able to offer it at a price point that's going to get the number of people that we need to go through the program. And as a success, as you'll see, there was very little. There's actually one trip, and I couldn't get the numbers on it, which would have been that original Sunshine Coast trip, which would have been back in 2004, 2005. You can see I came in about July of 2009, and luckily enough, we were part of the pilot program that Louise will be presenting on. And we had the benefit of a couple of trips ahead. The Tweed heads numbers were halved. We've worked with other candidates, and even in some of those numbers, as I said before, we've had to end up doing dogs in the shelter or pound to offer them some value. The future. Right. Now, the main thing is, I've always felt that we need to be far more strategic in the way that we're approaching PAWS for it to be effective. As I say, we've gotten it out there just to use the unit, to expose the unit, to get people to understand the unit. Now we need to sort of focus it far more effectively and go back to our original model. But we need to be informed with some hard data. We are in partnership with the University of Queensland, and we've been working off some of Corinne's work. We'd like it to inform areas where the greatest areas of our accessions, where the animals are coming from, so that we start within the source, work with the council to come up with a more targeted program. This isn't just spotlight on, spotlight off. We think we've got to go back in there and revisit fairly systematically, team up with other programs that are ongoing when PAWS leaves, so that we just start getting greater effect and greater numbers of animals and measuring that. We need strong coordinated partnerships. Obviously we do have them, but I think we've got a lot of work to do to work more closely together to make all of these programs complement one another and not be this perception of being competitive to one another or cannibalising some of those other programs. They need to be proactive and properly supported education programs. As I say, we have our EMU that's does run concurrently with PAWS, but more general community programs, and we've heard of some of those today. And then we need to measure and evaluate our performance to see if we are getting effect and look at the cost benefits. As I say, this is not the most cost-effective way. United we stand, divided we fall. As I say, it's really everybody getting together and supporting each other's programs. It's absolutely essential that PAWS becomes complementary. I would be greatly recommending that anybody that was looking at another mobile unit before this one reaches 100% capacity should look very long and hard at it. I would prefer that we got one unit across the whole region running at 100% rather than make that investment. I think we need to be very, very smart about our investment. All of us are incredibly resource limited, and it will only be looking at the benefit of what everybody can offer that will get the greatest success. Acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the staff because they do put an enormous effort into it. As I say, it's a military manoeuvre when PAWS goes away. There's weeks of planning that go into a trip. To Anne Chester and our vets at work, they're required to be incredibly flexible. As I say, it's not part of their general role, but they all get behind it. The Moreton Bay Regional Council, Louise Lawrence, has been incredibly supportive of RSPCA and the program, the PAWS program, using the benefit of her council experience to assist us with paperwork and models that we are then able to use with other councils. She's offered her time generously to work with other councils to actually promote the benefits of PAWS and some of her experience with Moreton Bay Regional Council. We would have been lost without it. The Sunshine Coast Regional Council, again, they've always been very, very good and very supportive of the program. Tweed Headshire Council, and I'm hoping to have many, many more to report in future times. So, all in all, as I say, there's a lot of effort. I sometimes refer to it as Mark Townend's dreams become our nightmare. It's not easy, and I think Mark would agree with that comment. But it was very, very visionary. Times are catching up. I think it was probably a little bit ahead of its time in 2004, but you need to push the envelope. I think now we're perfectly positioned and ironed out most of the issues operationally that we've ever had with the unit to make it far more effective. Thank you.